Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge Podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hey there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Childcare Bridge. Today's topic is, when does it make sense to open my next location? So as you start to gain traction with your first location or your second or third, you tend to start to get that itch of, should I open location number 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever your goals and objectives are. Historically, that itch starts to happen when you see those enrollments flying in. Other times the itch happens when you're at full capacity. There are some center owners that have the itch literally on day one of them opening up their first location or their next location. They're like, I want more. So what I wanted to do was share with you a couple of practical pieces of information that you want to keep in mind, some things you want to consider, some signals that you might want to look for that say, hey, maybe now is a good time to open a new location. Now, my disclaimer and my asterisk to you is this is not a one-size-fits-all strategy. There are some centers that we work with that their entire strategy is total world domination. And they'll say, Michael, my goal is 10 centers in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Maybe it's even more, 20, 30 centers over 5 years. Like, they want to aggressively expand. Those are very different strategies from, when do I want to open up location number 2 or location number 3? Like, they're just very different strategies. Aggressive growth like that of 10 locations in a short time span, that requires typically some private equity money, some angel investor money. There's a couple of other things that are at play if you're looking to kind of grow to that scale that quickly. So for the lion's share of centers that we work with, they have at least one location and then they get the itch to open another location. Now, the itch isn't simply always finances. Often it's they're seeing the impact they're making in the community and they're ready to amplify that. Like, let's expand the teachings. Let's expand that impact that we're making in this particular city and let's go over here. So the first thing that I want to look at is, when you're looking at opening up another location, I need to see how stable and how well run is your current center. How many enrollments do you have compared to what your capacity is? How does your profitability look? How is your lead flow? How are the foundational elements at your center? So for me, those are a lot of operational items. Do you have all that stuff buttoned up? Good front desk? Are you looking at your financials at least once or twice a month and getting into those rhythms and looking at your cost of goods sold and analyzing the numbers and forecasting out profitability? Like, are you looking at all of that? So I always want to look at, if your center is a little rocky, if you don't have a solid foundation, if you can't tell me within a small percentage of how your profitability is looking, how are your profitable ratios, how many more staff do you need to add to get to your optimal ratios? If you don't have those numbers and those metrics that you can rattle off quickly, you are not ready to open up another location. There's a lot of centers that they get the hype and they're like, something strikes them. And a lot of times it's market conditions, and typically a center might close or go up for sale. And those are situations we're going to talk about in just a minute that you do want to be able to strike when the iron is hot if you can get a great deal. But I personally, for my comfort level, and everyone has a different level of comfort, I can't recommend to tell you that go and invest in opening up another location, whether that means another lease, you're acquiring another building. until you can show me and demonstrate that things are rolling. Things are smooth. We have meeting rhythms and meeting structures, and we have our vision and core values at the company, and we're tracking our key performance indicators. I need to know that you have that stuff set. So if you're telling me, Michael, yeah, we kind of have some of that, but not really, I need you to take a couple of steps back and look at what can you do to get those foundational pieces in place before you then relook at sender number 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. To me, the biggest indicator outside of having all of your ducks in a row is you've gotten to a place where your marketing engine is firing on all cylinders. Now, selfishly speaking, our clients, we are their marketing engine. So we know how their lead flow is going, how many tours they're doing, how many enrollments they're generating. Once you have that predictability, it can be game over in a good way. So here's what I mean by that. We're going to pick Orlando. I like to go to some of my favorite cities. Orlando, if you haven't heard me mention Orlando several times on this show, that's one of my favorite cities. So let's say you have a center in Orlando. Capacity for 150, let's say you're at 120 as an example. Simple math, $1,000 a month tuition, $250 a week. So great, you're moving along, and let's make some assumptions that your profitability is good, your culture, team is happy, you've worked through a couple of challenges, but things are moving in the right direction. You've got good systems, processes, procedures, happy families, good Google reviews. And then you get to a place where you know that for every $5,000 or $3,000 you invest, you generate 5 enrollments or 10 enrollments. And you're able to start to methodically and mathematically demonstrate that there's enough market demand in our area. Our marketing is better than others, but also the demand is there that if we pump and put more money in marketing, leads go up, tours go up, enrollments go up. When I get to that place where it is highly predictable and I start closing in on full to the place where I'm now going to finally start building a wait list, that starts to show me that there's some pent-up demand in this area. It could also show me that my marketing is better than other people. Other centers maybe aren't advertising as much. But if I'm able to predictably get new enrollments every month to the place where you can almost not handle the amount of tours you could get, that starts to tell me that, hey, we got something here. We need to start looking at another location. Now, if you were to tell me that your capacity was 150 and you were at 50, say, well, Michael, we're profitable. Say, okay, great. And if I do rough math, let's call it you're a $500,000 a year center. Let's say that you profited 100K, which would be a nice number to have. So yeah, 50 enrollments is good. You're moving in the right direction. But if I have capacity for another 100, I'm keeping my efforts focused on how do I maximize this location, this specific location. When you have worked the marketing to where it is marketing math, you input this amount of money, it spits out this amount of leads, this amount of tours, this amount of enrollments, why would you look at opening up another location when you could invest more money to fill up your current location? So my trigger to start looking for another location is when I'm starting to approach max capacity. Now, the other piece to that, though, is max capacity can often be a relative phrase. Max capacity may not be the most profitable for you. 120 or 130 could be a more profitable area for you. So you want to make sure you're doing all the math. You might need to retool some of the classrooms or add a specific classroom that is going to be more profitable for you. You want to analyze the classrooms and the enrollments that you have. So there's a lot of tweaking that you can do to make sure that you really have that location operating like a well-oiled machine. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that more often than not, there could be some expansion at your location. Is there another classroom that you could potentially lease? Is there spaces that you kind of are using for what offices or something that you're like, no, that actually is a classroom and we only have like one desk in there. So those numbers can start to tweak a little bit. But what I'm trying to kind of push to you is max out your current locations, max them out so that you have those highly profitable to where you're able to start banking some resources. Now, when I start to see us approaching capacity, I typically start to do one of a few things. Number one, I often will raise the tuition. If we were literally able to get people in at $1,000, nobody was really balking at the price, there's pent-up demand. I'm not saying that you can price gouge, but what if you raise that tuition by 10% and you were charging $1,200 or $1,100 a month? I mean, $1,200 would be a 20% raise. And now you start to massively improve your profitability. So one of those things when I see enrollments coming in very rapidly is I will start to tier the pricing a little bit if there is just so much demand, because unfortunately, most centers, and I've said this many times, most centers are undercharging. You're not charging enough to where your center can be widely profitable. You can take a healthy salary, have some money in the business and profits for you and your family. And the easiest lever to pull is to charge more tuition. It's not try and cut your staff and try and shave off $1 an hour or try and negotiate your food costs. There's always ways to save a little bit of money, but traditionally it's raise prices, get more enrollments and more profitable enrollments. Like those are the levers. So let's assume that you have your operation running efficiently, it's running well, your location is printing money, you're bringing in lots of new enrollments, you're rapidly approaching capacity. What I like to do then is I like to start the process of looking. And I typically will start to look at how many other centers are in the area. Are there any centers that might be struggling that I could potentially make an acquisition play for? You can either buy a new building, lease a space, or you can acquire. I'm a huge fan of acquiring other centers and seeing our clients, our centers, our members go through and actually acquire other centers. Now, in that particular case, if your enrollments are flying in fast and furious and there's a center that's half a mile away or a mile away, the chances are pretty high, unless they have a terrible reputation, they could be in a similar boat where they're at max capacity. It's very easy to find out what everyone's capacity is. You can check all this online. It's all public information. So you can go and see what the different capacities are at all the centers that are near you. You can also start to dig a little bit deeper and learn more about the area. Is there a new neighborhood that just opened up? Is there a new development where there's going to be another 1,000 families, for example? You can start to spot and see, are there certain trends that are pushing this demand upward? Well, all of a sudden, Winter Haven or Tampa or Lakewood Ranch in Florida was named one of the best places to live. Okay, great. You're going to have an influx of new families moving in. So there's a lot of different ways to analyze those metrics. But I am a huge fan of acquisition. Now, I mentioned earlier that if a center goes up for sale and you're not necessarily feeling like you're fully ready, I'm not saying to leap. What I'm saying is at least analyze the numbers. If you can put together a deal that's a little bit non-traditional, i.e. owner financing, owner debt, where you're often taking over the center, you're taking over their lease and running it, I can give you case study upon case study of clients of ours that literally got handed a center. Here you go. We can't do it anymore. The lease payment, I don't love having to make it every month. It's yours if you want it. Now, don't believe that it is all sunshines and rainbows. If they couldn't make it work, it doesn't mean that it can't work, but it also doesn't mean that it can. So I want you to go through the math. But if you're literally getting handed a center that they've already invested money in building out and hiring and generating enrollments, and you find, okay, great, their lease is a little steep. And right now, they're really not making any money. Maybe they're losing a small amount of money. But I believe that from the marketing that we've been doing, we can accelerate the marketing a little bit, get some more enrollments in that location as well as ours, and start to speed up that process to get them to profitability. You want to analyze those deals. Now, it's a different story if you look at a center and they're losing $40,000 a month and they're, hey, great, we'll give you this center. Well, that's a little bit of a different story. I personally couldn't stomach a couple of months at $40,000 a month out the window. And now 3 months later, you're over $100,000 in the hole, unless you were able to massively get a bunch of new enrollments. But that massive new enrollment count is going to take a massive amount of marketing. That's not going to be a $2,000 investment. You might need $50,000 or $20,000. You're going to need a hefty amount of money. Now, if you have lots of capital, again, you can take those risks potentially. But for me, I like to look at solid foundation. We're operating well. We have the marketing math moving in the right direction. We know we can put in $5,000 a month and we're going to get X result. We're getting great reviews. We have our stuff moving. And then what I do again is I'll start to look at the area and I'll start to see how many other centers are there. And it seems like there's more pent up demand. And then I'll start going on a hunt. And usually the hunt is all the center names. I find the owners of the centers. I'll make a generic letter. Usually I will not put my name. Usually it'll be a generic name with a P.O. box so that they're not aware of who's potentially trying to acquire them. So are you open for a conversation? And you might hear crickets, which is fine. And then I'll start working with my agent and seeing what's on the market by way of buildings that maybe have a really great selling price. What are some of the leases that are out there? Are there any spaces that we could easily convert? Now, the big kicker to all of this is that you have to have the ability to float. And when I say float, I mean to be able to float either some losses or to have some capital to get that business moving. As you saw from opening your first location or your second location or third, growth sucks cash. It's not free to open up a center. Even if you're taking a center over, there's going to be some costs involved, and that's if they're handing you the center. Even if they're not handing it to you, normally you can still get a screaming deal if you're acquiring another location. But you need to run the math. Like, this is all facts, not feelings. Don't fall in love with a location or a building. Run the math, run the numbers. How long is it going to take you to get that to profitability? If you're opening up a new location, do you have enough on your wait list? Do you have enough leads to where it warrants that second location where you can open with 30, 40, 50 enrollments? And here's the secret sauce, and this is what everyone misses. Start marketing before you have the location. So Michael, how would I do that? You start testing the market. You start putting feelers out. You start running Facebook ads, TikTok, Instagram, Google ads. You don't have to put a specific address. You say, we're opening up another location in the city of Orlando, and you target your area so that it's going to show to the people that you want. And you continue to test your theory around leads. And well, shoot, we generated like 100 leads. And you start to build up that interest. Hey, we have a current center. You can come and take a tour. We're going to put you as a founding family. You're going to have the first spot on our new location. We're finalizing that location as we speak, but we promise it's going to be within 3 miles of where you live. And I start to use that so that I know that literally we are walking in with enrollments. There's a childcare center that is up for lease 3 minutes from my house. And I called. And I thought that they were keeping the center there, but they're not. They're moving to a different location. Perfect building, nice area, but I'm starting from scratch for that location. The lease was exorbitant. It was like $20,000 a month or something, $25,000. It was high compared to the market. So if I am building this with no wait list, for example, I don't have any leads, how long is it going to take to fill that center? So now month one, I'm out, let's call it $20,000. Pay the lease, security deposit, probably another 10, utilities, building it out. I could be 6 months in and have not made $1. So if you're not doing the math and looking at how long is it going to take you to recoup that, how fast can you get enrollments ready so that literally day one, you open up that location with revenue, that's the secret sauce. You open up with enrollments with revenue, and you need to time it. Don't open up literally in the middle of the summer. If you're going to be opening, you need to know when those peaks and valleys are. Open up in the most strategic time. But before you're opening, you're building 3 to 6 to 9 months in advance. So the brand awareness is there. They're not like, oh, here's a new center. Like, they're already aware. That is what tells you to open up that next location. That's how you open up another location that's profitable and not get yourself into a spot where now building number one, location one is now funding number two, and you're bleeding capital there. And then you get into this tough spot. That is how I like to do it. Now, again, others have taken the approach of very aggressive, and they know that they're going to have to put in $500,000 and it's going to take 5 years to recoup, and they can figure out all the math that way. I'm a little bit less risky on the risk tolerance side. I don't have private equity backing. I self-fund everything. But if you're like most of the centers we work with, you got to get it to where your first one is operating well, you're profitable, you're starting to put some money in the bank, and then you have that pent-up demand. And then you start building that wait list, building the wait list, getting enrollments so that you can open with enrollments and really propel faster. We love working with fast-growing centers. If we can help you in any way, feel free to message me, fill out our form on nojokechildcare.com, Facebook message, Twitter, Instagram. I'm here at your service. As always, thank you for listening. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. See you next week.